Hey everyone, I'm Heather. Thank you so much for joining us for another Homeschool Live. Today we'll be hearing from some folks of World News Group. We'll be hearing from Brian and Jonathan, specifically from World Watch. If you're looking for a positive way to incorporate current events into your homeschool, then you need to just tune into this and share it with your friends. Get it out there, share it in your timeline. We want to get the word out, especially for those looking for a biblically based news source for sure. Thank you for joining me, Brian and Jonathan.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you, Heather.
So I am really excited to hear more about World Watch. But before we dive into the questions, you have a video, and yes. We'd like to just see what you have to offer.
Yes.
Imagine 10 minutes of real news designed for students, delivered each day to build news literacy, biblical discernment, and critical thinking, all delivered in a video package that looks as good as anything that you'd see on network television, but that doesn't insult your intelligence.
This is World Watch.
World Watch will keep you from fearing the news.
News isn't as bad as what you see on TV.
I've been in broadcasting and television for 30 plus years. This is different and it's good.
We are a complement to educators, whether it's history or geography, science or whatever. We're there to bring relevance.
This morning I was researching cricket. Yesterday I was researching the COVID crisis in India. Sometimes we're writing about food, it's a sport, it's history. There's something new every day.
It's a touchstone for what they're learning.
They're going to be consuming something. And so why not give them something to take a look at the world that you can do with them and help shape how that information is consumed and digested and that you can talk about.
The best journalism is explaining journalism. Here are some things you're going to need to know in the course of navigating this world, and we do that on an everyday basis.
As journalists, we have responsibility, and that is to report the truth. Our viewers, they depend on us.
We're able to share the difficult things, but then also remind our viewers that God is sovereign and He's holding the world in His hands.
You want to be very careful about how you choose to deliver information. I want to be really responsible with not just how we spell things on screen, but how that story gets told.
We take one story at a time, we tell that story honestly and in an interesting way, and we don't try to push forward some kind of a narrative.
But if we feel that there's a biblical relevance to a story that has a biblical implication, I think that's where we hit the nail on the head.
Our kids can't escape worldview. What's at stake is what kind of worldview.
Sometimes parents try to shelter their kids from what's happening in the world, and then they're not prepared when they go out into the world.
This is the time where a lot of these guys are figuring out who they're going to be and how they're going to think, and whether they develop it with this point of view or they're getting it from this is really important. Remember, whatever the news, the purpose of the Lord will stand.
Looking at the world in light of eternity. That's what we're teaching young people.
The viewers are so amazing. I love reading just the sweetest messages that we'll get from them and how we're inspiring them. We're actually making an impact.
Wow. There is a lot to unpack there.
I think we just unpacked it. I think we're good.
You said, our kids, they're going to be consuming something. And I remember growing up, the news was on all the time. This was before the internet, but I would wake up, my parents would have the news on. And now with the way everything has changed, it is everywhere. So tell us about the news source that you have for us, World Watch, so parents can be intentional about how their children see news today.
Well, I think one of the things that we do well, or that are get really excited about here, is that there's a lot of news out there in the world, right? And you're kind of inundated with it 24/7, and you're hearing it. And most of the time, as you hear it from most of the general news sources, it doesn't have sometimes the same value system or the same way of dealing with it as you do as a family, as a family unit, and how you want to address it. And the cool thing that we do is we really designed this so that one thing we do is we take all that big news and we really kind of filter it down. And so it's a 10-minute newscast, and it's just a solid 10 minutes of news. But it kind of covers a wide basis where it has world events, it has United States events, it has some local stuff, and maybe just some history and all these different elements that you can learn. And we kind of just we decipher it down, but we go at it with this idea that people don't know everything, right? And so as we start to explain these issues and we start to talk about these issues, we go at it going, hey, we need to give a background on what some of this stuff is. Like let's say we do something like Kamala Harris is doing stuff along the southern border. So we might do the story about what she's covering on the southern border, but then we might come back and do a feature about what a vice president typically does within an administration, right? So we know that there's a vice president, but nobody really never knows what the vice president does. Wow. And so something we've done is we've done a story on what a vice president is and how they function within the realm of the world. And so we take this assumption that, and really most news agencies should do that, right? That people don't really know everything. And so we kind of, I've been in news for about 17 years now, and I've worked in local broadcast forever. And I just came to start this last year with these guys, but we make these assumptions that people know everything about the economy, and they know everything about what's happening in Turkey, and they know everything that's happening in Afghanistan, and one of the fun things for us as we do this is we get to give you some background and really kind of do this. We go with this assumption that we don't really know that much about this topic, and so that we get to teach and tell and explain how it affects the world and how this affects you and how it affects your family. Wow. And then we also, we turn it over. And the cool thing for us is we're noticing we're in both schools and homeschools, and that as you watch this stuff, people are watching together. The families are watching together. The classes are watching together with the teacher. And so you also have that backbone there as well, where the parents and the teachers are talking through with the students. And so the students are just completely left to their own devices to make heads or tails of this stuff. And it's just really, it feels like a partnership as we start to deliver this stuff.
That's incredible, because it's not, the news trying to be the ones that tell them what's going on, but it's allowing people to think. And I mean, that's what homeschoolers are all about. We want our children to be thinkers, and critical thinkers, and to look at the news and, try to figure out what really is going on, and not to be brainwashed by what, the news is trying to portray. So I just love your approach. I think that is incredible, and that is what is absolutely needed.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Jonathan, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I was going to add a phrase that gets tossed around World Watch, especially when it was starting out, was we don't assume knowledge, which is kind of a summary of what Brian is saying. We're not assuming knowledge, and there is a lot of assumption that happens with other news outlets. And Nick Eicher, who's our chief content officer, one of the things he says it's almost something that it's almost just a way to shortcut being able to tell a story. Okay, I can cut some space, so I don't have to give context. And I think the fact that we don't assume knowledge is what makes World Watch appealing to the whole family, not just children. We kind of targeted it to the high school age, but there's really not much difference between the content that adults are learning from and the content that a teenager can learn from. The difference is that context. And so I think that's why, like Brian said, we're hearing that parents, we're hearing that teachers are really enjoying watching this with their families. I think it's because we as adults don't really want to admit that we don't know something. World Watch gives us the permission to okay, I learned it. Now I can act like I've always known that. So.
Yeah. It's always fun for me too when my wife goes, because we don't always watch at the same time, but when she'll go, oh, I didn't know that about this or that, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. And my wife's very knowledgeable, and I'm like, okay, if she learned something new, that's very exciting to me. That means a lot of folks learn something new, and we put it in a very straightforward way. I think that makes it easy to consume and easy to digest, and then easy to talk about, which is that to me is my favorite part, is that it gets talked about. Like we get a lot of letters in from people that just as a family, they're like, oh, this is our jumping off point where we just start talking about it every day, where we talk about the news of the day. Or for some families, it's just we just pray about the things that we saw on the news today or something. And so it's been really cool to hear how people are using it as a family or as a school.
And I think in other news platforms, there can be specific events that everybody touches on and then other things are left off. Is there a method you guys use to figure out what you want to touch on?
There's not a specific method, but what we do say is that there's a lot of complex issues that are out there. There's some stuff, that we might kind of stay away from if we don't feel like it's, and if we delve into something we think that may be tough for, some of our, because so we designed this for high schoolers, but in all honesty, we get a wide berth of people, from like 2 years up to 97 years that are watching this, but we have it with the high school in mind. But if we think there's something that might be a tough topic for somebody younger, we'll put a warning on the beginning of our show, so that we let people know, hey, look, you might want to watch this ahead with your family, before you share this with your family or your school. But we kind of just try to look at all the stuff as it comes in. But if there's a complex subject, like we'll often go at something 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So we say, hey, we're not going to cover everything in this one hit in this one day. So we might have a feature on something that's a minute and a half. And okay, so we hit it here this first time. We'll come back to it in another couple of weeks when another element of the story pops up. And then we kind of go that, so that we like to say we kind of lay the groundwork. All right. So the first time through stories, we're kind of laying the groundwork, and then we build on it in successive times of covering that story or similar topic in that around that story.
That's really good. And this comes out every weekday, every day of the week?
Monday through Friday. Yep.
Awesome. So I just appreciate, I wonder, we want to teach our kids what fake news is and real news is. And I know the first time I experienced and I realized how much fake news was out there, I was in the Middle East, and I was in Palestine, actually, and I was watching CNN, and what was going on right outside my door was not what they were talking about. And, people were calling me, and this has happened in several different parts of the world, actually. People would call me and say, wow, I can't believe this is happening. And I would be sitting there in the location they were talking about and say, that's not how it is. So I appreciate that, that more people are realizing that is an issue. And, a Christian company is getting the information out there in a humble way, saying we don't know everything, but this is what we have. So I just want to thank you for having this product, because it's so needed.
Well, and what's cool about that is we actually have a lot of viewers around the world, believe it or not, that are a lot of them are on missions or for whatever reason they're in another part of the world, and we'll actually do stories, right? And again, you can only tell so much of a story. Our stories generally run anywhere from 40 seconds to up to 2 minutes, but you can only tell so much of that. And it's kind of cool is we'll tell a story, right? And we'll get a message from somebody like you, Heather, and they'll go, hey, you may not realize this, and we didn't sometimes realize this part of it. And so like the next time we go back into that story, we can fill it out a little bit more. And so we've done that a few different times with people who are on the street, and in a place like that. And so, but the difference sometimes between us and maybe sometimes what you get elsewhere sometimes is that we strive to tell the story accurately the first go around, and that we don't try to just put our what we'd like it to be on the story. And that's something that we've kind of prided ourselves in, and as being part of the regular news world, the mainstream news world for all those years, that it's a difference. There is a difference, an intentional difference in doing that. So,
is there an example you could give us of a news story in the past year? Could you share what other news outlets were saying and how you presented it?
Oh, man, I had one, and I went to I spoke at a high school, and I wanted to point this out. and I can't remember off the top of my head. But I mean, ask another question, and I'll try and see if I can get that to come back.
I just threw that one at you. Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. But I actually had a good example of this. I actually went to speak at a high school up in Kentucky last year, and I had a really good example for them, and I kind of showed the difference between the coverage of it. It probably had to do with abortion, if I'm remembering, but I don't remember the specifics of the way it was covered. But
that's good to know that's one of the topics that you might approach, and that's good for our viewers to know. Sure.
Yeah, and that's a topic, again, that we kind of, you tread delicately through there, because we have to do a large audience, and typically if we're specific in the story, we'd put a warning on that type of story. So, yeah.
No, it's good. I mean, because I just last week, I think it was Sanctity of Life Sunday, and we went out and we were holding up the signs, and people were yelling out at my older teenage sons and my husband, like, stay out of women's rights. It's none of your business. So they were hearing the other perspective. In their mind, they're like, I'm protecting the life of the child. And so they were able to see, okay, these women, they're thinking they're fighting for women's rights, but really we're fighting for the life of the child.
And that would be an indication of the way that the story would hurt. Like, if you looked at any mainstream news source, you're going to find that they're going to go that this is the way the world thinks, and this is the way you should think about this particular subject. And for us, again, the Bible is the backbone of truth for us, right? And so when we approach a news story, we're going to do that with the Bible as the backstop for all of our stories. And so as we tell the truth of that story, it's going to fall in line with that versus what the world says about it. And so that would be a story that would probably be that's going to have a pretty clear differential between what you'd see here and what you'd see in our house.
So I'd love to know what caused the birth of World Watch. This is a fairly new product. Can you share just basically why it was launched?
Yeah, so we'll start answering that by giving context for who we are. So because I think that'll help to make it make sense. So the organization is World News Group. So as an organization, we've been trying to present, we have been presenting current events, doing journalism from a biblical worldview for kids for 40 years. So since 1981, we've been putting out magazines under the banner of God's World News to try to help kids think critically about current events and about what's happening in their world. And so, as an organization, World has been doing this for a long time, and that it's evolved into other mediums. We've developed things for adults, and we've gone to podcasts and websites and all these different things. But at the heart of it, at the core of it, has always been children. The importance of children knowing how to navigate. And so what we've been seeing the last couple of years is that while print reading, I don't think will ever go away, especially not anytime soon, the landscape is changing, and there are a lot more students in front of screens, and not just reading in front of screens. There's a lot of video content being viewed, being consumed. Streaming hours, or you look at streaming on YouTube, and you see the trajectory of it. I mean, it is going up exponentially. Billions of hours are being streamed every day. Whether that is a good or bad thing, what content they're viewing is good or bad, it's a fact. And what we thought, our CEO Kevin's decided was we need to be there. We need to that they're on those devices. We need to capture their attention there and try to help them make sense of all this other media they're consuming and that they're being hit with. And so it kind of came out of discussions and brainstorming of determining, what does that look like? What does streaming video look like? And how do you do that in a way that is edifying, in a way that is grounded in God's word? But that is very well done. That was a big thing that our CEO said it needed to be well done. And so that's when we went and found, we had known Brian Basham for a long time as a very very respected, very good in kind of the mainstream TV news world. And he agreed to come on, and really he helped us shape this program into something that's high quality and really really attracted the attention of many students over the last year. So we started that this past August, and we've been going ever since.
Awesome. So as you've been talking, we've had two viewers. Kristen says, we received God's Big World in the mail for our youngest. And Carrie says that we get World and my teens devour each issue. So that's good to know. And now, ladies, there's a new resource out there. And, as you're talking, I was thinking, even if kids aren't like looking up these issues, it's going to be coming at them through the ads, right? So they really can't escape it. So having this resource for parents to intentionally, like I mentioned in the beginning, give to them, that is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and thank you, ladies, for the shout outs. I'm so glad to hear that you're reading those magazines. That's something I'll pass on to Rebecca Cochran is the editor of those of God's World News, and she loves hearing from those who read. So I'll pass that along.
So my next question, I'll ask you, Jonathan, and if Brian pops back on, then he can give his view. Can you share with us how World Watch can help homeschooling families?
Yeah, I think there's a few ways. One I will jump into. It kind of relates back to the example Brian was giving a little bit earlier when he was talking about the abortion story, and then as you when you were kind of diving into your experience with your son and your husband, and what those women were shouting and saying, their perspective is we're fighting for women's rights. You guys were thinking, hey, we're looking out for this unborn child, and I think one way of many that World Watch can help is that World Watch can kind of remind you when you're looking at a news story, whether you're reading it, whether you're watching it, just to think about, okay, who is the quote unquote protagonist of this story? Because that can kind of give you a insight into the worldview. Because I don't think you should ignore worldviews that don't line up with your own, but you need to know how to discern what is coming at you. And I think that is a great example of that. Like you have that story of that abortion, what you experienced with your family, and what Brian was talking about. If you see, okay, is the narrative being written from the perspective of the mother, or are we ignoring and leaving out this unborn child and their perspective? I think that asking those kind of questions can help a homeschool family. Who is the protagonist in this story, and what obstacle is that protagonist trying to overcome? Is one way. I think another way it can help homeschool families is it just provides a way for homeschool families to go to a source that they can trust. I mean, as much as you can trust, content that you're getting on your computer, that you're watching on your TV. I say you can go to someone that you can trust, because we're striving to produce sound journalism that's grounded in God's word, and we are very careful to not force topics of discussion that you're not ready to have with particularly your young children. That's why Brian mentioned there's a warning at the beginning of the program, but we're trying to balance between not forcing conversations you're not prepared for, but also exposing you and exposing the family to things out there, so you can help facilitate discussion. So we kind of present topics up, introduce concepts, and what we're seeing from homeschool families is that they're having lively discussions at the dinner table. I heard from one family where the husband will get home from work, and then the kids are running to talk about things that they learned about World Watch, and then he's able to talk about things.
I love that.
Yeah, he heard on a podcast or he read in an email he got that morning. They can kind of talk about some of the similar topics and come at it from their different age levels. And that's really, I think, what we're about is we're reporting from a biblical worldview, and we want to help facilitate lively discussions with Christian families And so that's why it's 10 minutes. It's 10 minutes because it's quick hits, but it's enough to let the parent figure out, okay, where do I want to take this conversation? So those are two of many ways I think it can help homeschool families.
Wow, that's incredible. Brian, do you have anything to add?
That it's really fun. Sorry, I lost you for just a minute. Something happened with the computer, and I grabbed another computer real quick and jumped on.
Well, I'm glad you made it back.
Thanks. But anyway, I think our show is really fun. We really work hard to make it not just instructional, not just something to learn, but just fun. Like I think our families really get excited about coming to watch it every morning. And a lot of people tell us that's the first thing, and sometimes our kids run down the stairs and yell for worldwide. Like that's exciting to hear. So I think it's really fun.
Well, seeing the promo that we had at the beginning, it just seemed really engaging and lively, and definitely something that kids would look forward to for sure.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could describe what you see as one of the biggest challenges that parents face as they help their children think critically about world events.
Well, I mean, I think this is something kind of we alluded to a little bit earlier. I mean, I have a 7 and a 12-year-old girl. Well, they're 2 girls, 7 and 12 years old. But anyway, they're and they're both kind of inquisitive in different areas. And my 12-year-old is completely engaged with learning about things and understanding and seeing how the world works. But the thing that's kind of scary for me as an adult is to go, okay, most kids want to spend time on the internet, and you got to be really careful about what's out there because there's so much information. A lot of it's good, a lot of it's interesting, a lot of it's right, and then there's a lot of it that's all this other stuff, and so it's going to be really an issue of where they're coming from and what they're going at to get that information. And so that for me is kind of one of the key things to do this is kind of just go, okay, look, we can kind of just push out all this stuff that's not necessary, that we don't need in our kids consuming, and we kind of just weed out a lot of that stuff. And I think one of the biggest issues for a parent is trying to decide, where my kids can get that information, what they're learning, and really, I think the biggest issue is what they're hearing about a subject, right? Because if you watch most news, they're trying to tell you how you should feel about this, and how you should feel about that, and how you should feel about this. And for a lot of families I talk to, it's not stuff I want my kids to hear. It's not things I want my kids to think. And for us, I that's really, as we attack the news, we really are very conscientious of that as we put that together.
And I need to be completely honest. I don't know of any other source out there that anybody else that does what you guys do. When I think about how for my kids, what I, besides the conversations that we have, I let them watch, satire that's put up, and it's terrible. I mean, it's not terrible, but that's not the only source, I'm not going to name names, but there's certain Christian satire organizations out there that will approach the news, in that manner. And I'll let my kids watch that, but I really need something like what you guys have, where it's actually news-based, presenting it in a professional format. So I am really excited to check out World Watch. If you could give parents one piece of advice for their students right now in today's climate, what would that be?
I'll let you start that, Brian.
I was going to do the same to you. The thing I would say, first and foremost, is don't be afraid to talk about the news with your kids, right? And a lot of the news that's coming in, even if something seems a little hairy and something, look, if your kid heard it, are you going to let it just sit with what they heard, or as you as a parent going to engage with them and either set the record straight or really just kind of help talk through it? And this is where we talk about the critical thinking. And for us, it's funny because we pride ourselves on that in trying to develop critical thinking, but it really just barely starts with us. And then when we hand it off to the parents, the teachers, and so forth, and the other siblings, is that is to talk about it and really kind of hash through all the stuff that's happening in the news. And I think the cool thing for us, and we hear this a lot, is that for a lot of times, sometimes parents, depending on how old the kids are and where you are with them in your relationship with them, sometimes it's easier to talk to your kids and sometimes it's harder to talk to your kids. And that this is something that kind of gives them a place to jump off and go, hey,
Right.
I saw this story. What do you think of that? Or the kid might go, hey, Mom, I'm kind of curious about this. Can you tell me more about it? And so don't be afraid to go ahead and just dive into these subjects with your kids and really kind of talk through it with them. Because again, if you leave it to the internet to figure out what it is about this subject, you're really kind of leaving it into who knows whose hands. And that's, I think that's part of and that for me, that's kind of the most important thing. So I think it's important for kids to know news. And I know it's almost instinctual for us to protect them from everything that's happening in the news, but I think it's valuable for them to know news, but I think it's valuable for us to talk about it as a family or as a group.
And so is this available for everyone worldwide? Is this just a US-based company? Who can access WorldWatch?
Anyone. Yeah, it's
Okay.
everyone with an internet connection.
Awesome. Well, that's good to know. Do you have any advice for us, Jonathan, before we let our viewers know how they can access WorldWatch?
I think Brian covered it. I think maybe what I just said would just add to that would be to not be afraid. And I'm not implying that most parents are, but there is Brian said it well in his promo video where he said they're going to be consuming something. So you want it to be from this point of view, or do you want it to be from this one? That's an important question. I think I feel like that honestly, I have 3 children myself, younger than Brian's, but I have a 7, 5, and a almost 3-month-old, and with the older 2, what I just see is they're going to. There's going to be something hitting. Someone's going to be teaching them something. Someone's going to be exposing them to something. And if I'm not careful, someone else is going to be raising them. And so I think the same thing can be applied here. You don't necessarily need to watch or consume this, but you should be paying attention to what they are consuming. They're going to be consuming something. So where do you want it to be coming from? That would be my piece of advice.
Wow, awesome. Well, thank you. So one of you please share how our audience can check out purchase of, it's a subscription base, I'm assuming, membership to WorldWatch?
Yeah, it is subscription based. And so actually we have a URL. It's a worldwatch.news. That's the website. And then /schoolhouse. And so right now we have a $20 off for those who are going there for a limited time, but we are kind of all the time having a 30-day trial there. So if you go there right now, first button there, you can claim a 30-day free trial of WorldWatch and check it out right away. So that's what I'd encourage you to do. So you can easily jump in and check it out either on your computer or you can cast it up to your TV.
Awesome. I love that. Oh, I think Brian's muted. Let me see if we can unmute him. Can you unmute yourself? There we go.
Yeah. So anyway, so what's cool about this is that we also have posted every show that we've ever done on there. So we get binge watchers. We get people who come and they are new subscribers and they're like, we just binge watched like 10.
I love it.
So it's pretty fun. And we've got a place where we keep our feature. We've got our whole show. We've got our features that we've done. And so if you're interested in this topic, you can go and kind of hunt around and find stuff. And so it's all everything that we've done is on there. So you can when you check it out for a month and you're like, oh, you might have seen one show, you can go back, hey, I want to know what they've done for a month or two, and you can go check it all out. It's right there for you.
So I just wanted to throw up a couple comments before we sign off, because Stephanie's saying that she loves it and she's in Canada.
Hey, Stephanie.
And let's see. If we're not careful, someone else will raise them. back to what you were saying earlier. So it's important to take that responsibility back that God has given us as parents. So I think our audience is really excited about what you have to offer. Thank you so much for sharing this with us today. I really appreciate you taking the time out to share about World Watch. Are there any closing thoughts that you would like to give us?
Well, I always have one closing thought that I leave at the end of every show, and this is kind of our tagline. We've used this from the very beginning. But as you watch news and you let that news, and sometimes it can be a little overwhelming and whatever. Remember, whatever the news, the purpose of the Lord will stand, and that's how we leave everybody as we send them off every day.
Amen. Well, thank you so much. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this interview. And I just wanted to remind you that today is the last day of our Keep Your Children Home Mama sale at schoolhouseteachers.com. So if you head over there, you can get an incredible deal if you use code HOME at checkout. And I hope that you will join me next time for another Homeschool Live. Thank you.